Alrighty, good morning. How we doing, everybody? Steve here, and today we're going to be talking about this right down here. Not enough recovery because I feel good, and unfortunately, excuse me. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are involved in health and fitness. They get the bug, they go to the gym, they work out, they download some type of app or routine, or they make one up on their own, and they come away with this mishmash of exercises where basically you're not giving enough time for recovery of your muscles that you're working. And usually this is done by new people. They go to the gym, they work out, they feel good. This is over the time of the initial DOMS or the delayed onset muscle soreness, and they're really rocking and rolling, and they're feeling great. And so what they do is either they'll read some bad information or get a bad routine on the internet, or they'll make up their own and saying, well, if working out 2 to 3 times a week is good, then more is obviously better, and I'll get better results with more exercising. The problem with that is you need to have some recovery time for those muscle groups that you work to allow for muscle protein synthesis. Now, this is kind of a gray area type of situation because there's a number of studies that show how many hours do you need between workouts. It varies, and we'll go over that. But then there's also studies showing muscle protein synthesis on how that works. In other words, your body rebuilding the muscle fibers and then building or repairing muscle fibers, and then your body actually building more muscle fibers to combat against that stimulus that you put on them through resistance training. So with that said, what I want to do is go over some information and give you an example of what we're talking about here. So let's take a look at this here. And this is an example, and I'm not going to show the guy's name because I'm not trying to put him down or anything, but I just want to go over the information and how I've seen people do similar things with this right here in his workout, that people will overload and do too much and not allow for enough recovery. So for example, he says thoughts on this: upper lower split 4 to 6 times a week depending on how I'm feeling. So Monday, what he'll end up doing is an upper workout that does shoulder press, machine bicep, and it's all pretty much three reps, or 3 sets of 10 reps. Machine bicep curl, tricep dip machine, shoulder raises, bench press, shrugs, bicep curls, tricep pulls, cable rows, chest press, hug, I'm assuming that's a pec deck, lat pull down, calf raise, leg press, weighted calf raises. And then on Tuesday, what he ends up doing is leg press, hip abductor, squat, leg extensions, hamstring extension, lay down hamstring, deadlift, hip abductors, calf machine, weighted calf raises. And then what I'm assuming he's doing is repeating this so that he works these muscle groups 4 to 6 times a week, depending on how he's feeling. So maybe if he's feeling good, he might do more and minimize the amount of rest between his workouts. But the problem that we see, and what ends up happening, is there's not a lot of rest period between his workouts. So it's not allowing for proper recovery. And usually what you'll see for new people, what I end up doing and what other instructors will do, will recommend 48 hours between workouts, sometimes even into 72 hours. There is no reason to go crazy. You can ease into the routine. You need to learn how to do the exercise correctly, within safety guidelines, so that you minimize the chances of injuries. And there's no need to go through the DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness, that can just ravage you for days and days on end and be a negative reinforcement for going to the gym and working out. I'd rather have it a more positive ease in, especially as I'm a senior now. I'm 57 and I've been lifting for quite some time. well versed in nutrition and exercise physiology and so on and so forth. Because my time in the military, I was a physical fitness trainer, and I was the one who helped the people that didn't pass their Army physical fitness test and or couldn't, meet the body weight standards. So in other words, they had too much body fat, they couldn't pass the PT test, and I was also trained in nutrition during that time. So I got all the people that couldn't do it, and I was able to make them, meet the standards of the United States Army through nutrition and exercise and so on and so forth. So that was some awesome stuff. A lot of great references, and I really took it to heart because pretty much anything I get into, I dive into that with a gusto, especially if I'm interested in it and I really enjoy it, which I was. But going back to this, what we end up seeing with this exercise routine, there's some holes in here. We see like shoulder press, raises. It's weighted calf raise, a lot of calf raise, leg press, weighted calf raises. You could probably just do heavier weights and minimize one of those. I don't see enough. It's kind of like a mishmash of kind of like a superset, but we're just going to kind of do shoulder, bicep, tricep, shoulder, bench, shrugs, curls, tricep, rows, which is basically pulling. It's really kind of a mishmash. And then you do the lower body, which, what about leg curls and things like that? It just seems, squats. He's got squats in there. But there's really, doing this over and over 4 to 6 times a week is not going to give your body enough time to recover. And we're going to go over some information on that. So, for example, on this here, effects of consecutive versus non-consecutive days of resistance training on strength, body composition, and red blood cells. Health authorities recommend 2 to 3 days a week of resistance training performed 48 to 72 hours apart. That's what they recommend. I would say minimum of 24 hours and then a maximum of 72 hours. To examine these effects, and basically what they ended up doing is they randomly assigned people to these 30 people to a 24-hour between sessions group and a 48 to 72-hour between sessions for 12 weeks. It doesn't say that they're healthy and recreationally active, but they doesn't say that they were newbies to the gym or things like that. So it's kind of ambiguous there. So they did 3 sets of 10 reps and 10 repetition max of leg press, lat pull down, leg curl, shoulder press, leg extension for each session. Pulse and blah, blah, blah. So basically training they found was all strength and body composition, and that pretty much everything went up. There was no significant change, but they all went up in regards to exercise, bone density, things like that. And it talks about hematocrit and so on and so forth. So it came down, it says both the consecutive and non-consecutive resistance training had similar improvements in strength and RCB parameters, so blood parameters. So in other words, it shows that 24 hours is a good amount of time between muscle groups, but also is 48 hours to 72 hours. So, where do we stand on this? Do we just say, 24 hours is it, so I'm going to do 24 hours between muscle groups? No, because it's not that set in stone. There's some other information. So for like this study here, high-frequency resistance training is not more effective than low-frequency in increasing muscle mass and strength. Let's see if we can get down here. And this is just the abstract, just kind of the overview of what went on. And both groups performed the same number of sets and exercises, 10 to 15 sets, 1 to 2 exercises per week, 8 to 12 repetitions, about 70 to 80% of the 1 rep max, 5 times a week. Muscle strength, blah, blah, blah. So they pretty much had improvements in strength and, of course, lean tissue mass with no difference between groups. So the high frequency and low frequency are similar overload strategies for promoting muscular adaptation in well-trained subjects when the sets and intensity are equated per week. So again, we see another study is talking about, minimal amount of recovery time of 24 hours and longer. So what is it? Ends up. So there's that. And then time course for elevated muscle protein synthesis following heavy resistance exercise. Now, here is where we get into a different area. So you can recover, and you can do 24 hours recovery. You can do 48 to 72 hours between recovery and get similar results with the exact same volume, sets, reps, going to failure, percentage of 1 rep max. You can get similar results. What's interesting is we come into play when we start looking into muscle protein synthesis and how long does it take to repair muscle fibers, and then how long does it take to build muscle fibers. So that's something else that comes into play as well. And again, this isn't a hard, fast thing to say, oh, you only need 24 hours, thus you should only do 24 hours of recovery between your workouts. Any less than that would be suboptimal. But another thing to consider is the muscle protein synthesis. Now, in this study, the time course for elevated muscle protein synthesis following heavy resistance exercise that came out in 1995, it's been shown that muscle protein synthesis is elevated in humans by 50% at 4 hours following a bout of heavy resistance training and 109% by 24 hours. This study examined that the time course for elevated protein synthesis at rates of 36 hours following a training session. So it was calculated, they do the little thing. At an average time of 36 hours post-exercise, MPS, that exercise arm, had returned to within 14% of controlled value, the difference being non-significant. It is concluded that following a heavy bout of resistance training, MPS increases rapidly, is more than double at 24 hours, and thereafter declines rapidly, so that 36 hours, it has almost returned to baseline. So with that being said, in this information, when we talk about muscle protein synthesis, we can see that we can get good recovery at 24 hours, and then at 36 hours, it is almost returned to baseline. So if you're going to err on the side of caution, then what you could end up doing is saying, okay, well, I'm going to have 36 hours between my workouts to fully facilitate muscle protein synthesis. And of course, this is dependent upon having a good recovery cycle, which includes nutrition, enough carbs and protein as the building blocks to get that hypertrophy, get those strength gains, get the carbs that you need and the energy and the fats to help that recovery process in building new muscle. So yeah, you can say, okay, it's 24 hours is good, but it might be, depending on the person who is lifting and their experience. If they're a new person, I would err on the side of caution and go for 36 hours between workouts, especially if it's a new person. Because really a new person, they're going to be using muscles that they haven't done before. They're going to have muscle soreness to some degree, and we try to minimize that. And then, tendon problems and issues for the fact that what they ended up doing is, hey, I've never done this before, and your tendons are kind of like, whoa, what are we doing? Put me back on the couch with the donuts. So it needs that time to recovery. And we do know from studies that new people need more recovery time than experienced lifters. So take that into consideration. Now, the other thing that comes into play when we talk about this is intensity of your workouts. So depending on how much of your 1 rep max that you are working, and volume is thrown into there, and your nutrition and so on and so forth, and depending, are you doing fasted workouts or are you working out after you had a meal, so you've primed the pump, so to speak. All of these variables come into play and can have an effect on your recovery. So people that do fasted workouts, you're putting it yourself at a disadvantage. Now, just hear me out. I know some people are just going to, the intermittent fasters are going to blow their minds and just frag this. But when you work out in a fasted state, depending on your goals, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, and that can be good if you are trying to lose body fat. However, if you're trying to build muscle, then generally what you want to do is you want to have fuel in the tank before you go on the race, to give your body the energy it needs for hypertrophy or strength training. So really it comes down to the goals of what you want to do. It is really going to drive your, whether you're fasting, whether you're eating, the volume, the number of sets and repetitions that you're going to do to attain your goals of, power, strength, hypertrophy, endurance, whatever those are. So there's going to be a little bit of variables within that. But we do know that 24 hours is probably the easiest place to start and have a rest recovery period between your workouts. And here's another thing that we're going to take a look at. If we take a look at this here, the development of skeletal muscle hypertrophy through resistance training, the role of muscle damage, and muscle protein synthesis. Now, again, this isn't the whole study. It's just, I've had some people that are like, oh, that's just an abstract. That's just what they think. Well, if you pull up the actual study, the abstract is kind of like the cliff notes of the entire study. So this isn't the only thing from this study, okay? Some people have accused me of, no, that's just abstract. It's just what they think. It's not the actual study. Yeah, well, if you pull up the actual study, you'll see. But we're not going to go over the entire thing because it can get a little bit redundant. But anyway, it talks about how the skeletal muscle hypertrophy is a highly intricate process. The aim is to discuss new insights related to skeletal muscle damage and muscle protein synthesis. So anyway, after 10, it ends up specifically the thesis that in the early phase of resistance training, so less than 4 resistance training sessions, increases in muscle sectional area is mostly attributed to muscle damage-induced muscle swelling. Then, after 10 sessions, a modest magnitude of muscle hypertrophy ensues, but only during a latter phase of resistance training of about 18 sessions is true muscle hypertrophy observed. We argue that the initial increases in MPS post-resistance training are likely directed to muscle repair and remodeling due to damage and do not correlate to eventual muscle hypertrophy induced by several resistance training weeks. So basically what we end up seeing, and a lot of new lifters, new people into health and fitness will do, those 8 to 10 sessions, and they get this, they see, oh, look at this, I'm getting bigger. And they attribute that to hypertrophy. And so they think, well, whatever I'm doing now, I'm going to do more, and so I'll get more results. That's not necessarily the case, because as we can see by this study, that in those beginning sessions, less than 4 and up to 10, that really the swelling that you get is muscle damage-induced muscle swelling. So it's not true hypertrophy. So what I've seen, and I've seen this in my life and in other people's lives that I've worked with and in the military and exercising, is that people will say more is better, more is better. So look at how big I've got. And they've done like a month, maybe 2 months of exercises, and they're like, oh, more is better, more is better. So they add on the frequency and minimize the recovery time between their workouts. Now, I am not saying that high volume is not a thing, because it is. High volume is a thing. There have been studies that show that doing high volumes, in other words, a certain amount of sets per week per body part or muscle group, will result in more hypertrophy. And it used to be a limit of like 10 to 15, and then there were studies that showed it was like 20 or 25, and then recently there have been studies that shows like 30 and 40. And then there was even one study, if I'm not mistaken, it went up to like 50. So volume can produce more hypertrophy, but not at the expense of recovery. And so that's very important, because there's a lot of things that you need to recover from and allow the body and that muscle protein synthesis to occur. By shorting yourself, by minimizing the amount of recovery time, you're shorting the gains that you can get in hypertrophy, strength, and power. So it's one thing to say, oh, just 24 hours. That study showed that's that'll work, and so that's all I need to do. Again, it depends on the volume. It depends on the intensity that you use. If you're doing, which can vary between doing like 50% to 70% of your one rep max versus 70 to 80 versus 90 to 100% of your one rep max. Those things might take more recovery. So that's why I suggest, a minimal of 24 hours between muscle groups and up to 36 hours. Now, you might even go even further, and depending on what you're doing, it's okay to have 48, 72 hours between resistance training workouts. We don't see a diminishing return in regards to hypertrophy. Excuse me. We don't see diminishing returns in regards to hypertrophy. But what we do see is that it kind of peters out for the longer recovery periods that we have. So again, there's this balance that we need to do with our routines, and a lot of that comes down to nutrition as well. I've seen people that kind of similar to this gentleman here who said, I'm doing a full body exercise 6 days a week. And you looked at his routine and it was absolutely insane. And it was like he gave himself no recovery time whatsoever because he was doing full body 6 days a week. And it's like, yeah, you're doing, in other words, he was doing the exact same exercises for chest, back, arms, shoulders, abs, legs, the whole 9 yards every single day. There was no differentiation between the exercises, the body parts, and so he's not giving any recovery time. And then he's wondering why he's plateauing in his journey of health and fitness, of trying to get stronger and, grow some muscle. You're doing it to yourself. You're cutting off your gains by not having enough recovery time. So on one extreme, we see people that will, kind of like be that guy. You don't want to be that guy and have no recovery time between workouts. And then you have other people on the other extreme that have way too much time of recovery. It's kind of like that, the Mike Metzer, one set per body part, crazy thing that's been disproved so many times, and only work out once every 10 days and, or some crazy thing like that. You've gone so far past that there is no additional gains that you can get by having such a long recovery time, at least according to science-based testing. So we need to take all these things into consideration. But basically, I think the biggest thing that we see with new lifters is they start experiencing what they think is hypertrophy or gains, and what it really ends up is being just swelling from muscle damage of the resistance that you put on those muscle groups. And so they decide, well, if I do this and I got this as a result, based on my experience, doing more, I will get even more hypertrophy, more strength. Yes, you can increase the volume, but don't decrease the amount of recovery time, because that will take away your gains. So, I just wanted to go over this information and show, an example of this, and just highlight some of the things that people go through and people will come up with. Because if you do all this, now, is there enough recovery time between his workouts? Let's go back to that. He's doing like on Monday, he's doing all of this stuff, and then Tuesday, and then he goes back Wednesday and does all this again. I personally, I don't think so. This just ends up being like almost on the verge of being a full body workout, and I don't think there's enough recovery time. And the other thing that with this type of workout and similar types of routines is that it doesn't really allow for you to work on your weak areas or areas that you need to improve on at the beginning of your workout, where you have the most intensity. In other words, when you're most refreshed, when you're right out the gate, you're ready to hit it. If you're lacking in chest, you should be doing chest first. If you're lacking in back, do that at the beginning of your workout. If you're good on, your legs, leave the legs until last. or whatever. You kind of get the idea that I'm talking about, because by the end of your workout, your intensity, and you're going to be fatigued. Your central nervous system is not going to be as fresh and as intense as it was in the beginning of your workout. And so whatever body parts that you work out towards the end of your workout, you're not going to get a lot of good results. So that's another thing that I have a problem with full body workouts every day or every other day, is that you're kind of pushing the limit, especially every other day. It's doable. Excuse me. It's doable, but it comes down to nutrition. It comes down to your recovery and sleep. It comes down to the individual user and their experience and how well they respond. Now, remember, the studies that we looked at, it's not set in stone that 24 hours is what you need at minimum. It could be because of individual variables in your life, just of how you're made and genetics and so on and so forth. You might need longer times for recovery. So again, this is where we need to I don't want to say listen to our bodies, but and definitely don't base it on how I feel good, because you can feel good but not have enough recovery for muscle protein synthesis, as we saw in those studies. So trusting in your feelings. The heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? Feelings. It's so subjective. It's really hard to nail down something concrete when it comes down to getting the gains that we want and attaining our goals. So, but we definitely know for sure that if you don't have enough recovery between your workouts, you're going to lose out on gains, whether it's hypertrophy, strength, power, endurance, and things like that. So, it's some very interesting information when we talk about building routines. Now, some people are wondering about the routine that I do, and basically, let's go over it. You want to hear it? I think so. Maybe. We'll see. And this is a routine that I made up that is for me. Okay. Now, this is based on my experience. I'm an experienced lifter. My nutrition is nailed down pretty tight. I have visible abs at 245 pounds at 6'2" at 57. And I have done the push-pull leg. I have done the bro split. I've done different variations. Some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. The stuff that didn't usually wasn't, backed by science-based evidence and training and testing. So, now I don't even consider things that aren't even backed by science, because it's, why waste your time? But let's take a look at what I end up doing. And I've made some adjustments to this, and I use JFit. And my current routine is on day one, I'll do biceps, triceps, and shoulders, number one. Then I'll have a day off, and then I'll do abs, chest, back, and legs, number one. Have a day off, then abs, biceps, triceps, and shoulders, workout two, and then have a day off, and then go back to chest, legs, or back and legs, workout number two. Now, the difference between workout number 1 and 2 is that with the workout number 1, I'll use heavier weights. And on workout number 2, I'll do more isolating exercises that involves machines and cables, things like that. I'll still go heavy, but I use different angles of attack to produce more hypertrophy, more resistance, more time on tension on the muscle groups, more stretching, weighted stretching, and take advantage of that as well. There's a lot of different tips and tricks, because you can go and lift weights in the gym, and you can work your triceps, but it's a whole different animal when you start changing the tempo of your exercises versus just kind of doing this with a bicep curl versus going up for 1 second, squeeze and get that 1 to 2 second squeeze on the bicep as hard as you can, and then do a 4 to 6 second slow negative, which slow negatives have been shown by science to be more effective with hypertrophy. So when you see somebody in the gym just going up and then going down, you're losing the gains that you can get for hypertrophy and strength by just letting the weight go down. By doing a slow negative 4 to 6 seconds, you're going to maximize your hypertrophy and strength gains. pause reps, all those things. There's different types of techniques and strategies that science-based evidence has shown to work in regards to hypertrophy and strength training and stuff like that, power training. So I take advantage of those things. But with that, in my workout, what I've ended up doing, I've done high volume. I've done like 30 and 40 sets per muscle group because, studies have shown that high volume works, and it does. But again, with that amount of volume and that amount of work, and depending on the lifter and their experience, you might need to extend your recovery time. That's something else that is interesting that we did not see in those studies is what about high volume training and high intensity training where you're going from like 80 to 100% of your 1 rep max? How does that relate to the recovery process? And generally what we end up seeing, there's no specific study showing that, but generally what we see when we reach those higher percentages of our 1 rep max, it's more intense, causes more muscle damage, so that it just stands to reason that it would be reasonable to assume that you need a little bit more recovery time than normal. So to err on the side of caution, that's something that you might want to take into consideration. With that being said, I'm still doing the same routine. I'll do my weak areas first. So like on day one, let's go back to the picture. Like on day one, I do biceps, triceps, and shoulders is what we end up seeing there. If I'm weak on shoulders, I will do shoulders first. And my shoulders were weak for quite some time. So what I ended up doing is putting that muscle group first before I did biceps and triceps, or in my regular workouts where I didn't have it organized in this manner. So I really had the most intensity, I was the most fresh, I could put the most emphasis on that lacking muscle group, and boom, now I've got shoulders. Same thing when we go down to abs, chest, and back, and legs. Abs I just put on any day. It doesn't really matter. I just do them twice a week, and I do like 3 exercises, and works out great. For chest, back, and legs, if I'm lacking in my chest, and at one time my upper chest was really, really lacking. I didn't have this shelf here that I've developed, or that line of the two pecs coming together, until I started putting emphasis on higher volume in chest and putting them at the beginning of my workout. So in other words, for my upper chest, I'm doing a lot of incline dumbbell work, and I'll do incline press to work that upper chest area, and that has really paid off. And of course, the tempo comes into play. That 1 second, 1 to 2 second peak contraction, then 4 to 6 seconds slow negative, which is a proven scientific technique that is awesome. I mean, you want to turbo your hypertrophy gains and strength gains, do that, especially for hypertrophy. A lot of time under tension, more muscle activation. It is great. But with that being said, my chest really came in, and I've got more definition. I've got more muscle mass in my chest because I put that first on that day. Now with that, after a certain amount of time, now again, what we end up seeing from that study we mentioned is you start seeing results after 18 training sessions. This kind of highlights another problem that we see with newbies and the problem of social media. In social media, there is a plethora of people out there who are saying, oh, you want big arms? Do this. You want a big chest? Do this. If you want this or that, do this. Some people will do, this exercise and these exercises, or this cable machine, or this exercise with kettlebells. And they jump all over the place. It's like they have ADHD when it comes to workouts, exercises, and they don't focus enough on one exercise for a long enough period of time to get the hypertrophy or the gains that they can attain from that exercise, because they're jumping all over the place. So my recommendation is to do, a couple different exercises, anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe even 5 exercises per muscle group, and just have those exercises and work them for 2 months. Do them for 8 to 12 weeks and find out how your body responds. Then when you've done that for 8 to 12 weeks, then switch out an exercise for another exercise that works that same muscle group, maybe at a different angle, trying to keep the other variables the same. And you'll find that there are some exercises that you will respond to better than others. So if your goal is hypertrophy or if your goal is strength, that's what you need to do, is this weeding out process of saying, yeah, this is a good exercise. He got some great gains with that. But for me, this one worked better for me, and so I'm using it. And I have the data and the proof and the numbers to show that it works better for me. Then run with that. But the problem is today we have people that just jump all over the place. For example, there was a guy I ran into who's like, yeah, I'm trying to build my chest, and I was doing this, and then I was doing this. Good Lord, he changed his exercises like multiple times in a week. And he's like, I'm having a hard time because I'm not seeing any improvement. Well, there needs to be consistency within your training over a certain period of time to get those results. And again, showing that study that we looked at about when muscle protein synthesis and how long it takes for muscles to be repaired and built attest to that. So I know everybody wants it now and they want it quick, fast, and in a hurry. But when it comes to hypertrophy and strength gains and things like that, it's going to take time. So stop jumping around all over the place and trying to follow your favorite influencer. Do a program, work at 8 to 12 weeks, and then adjust with small, tiny incremental changes in exercises and things like that. So yeah, whatever is lacking, work that first. That's the best thing that I can say that people can do. But unequivocally, do not shortchange your recovery. And with recovery also comes into sleep and the quality of sleep that you're getting. Some people can sleep for 7 to 8 hours, but they don't get good quality sleep because they don't have good REM sleep. There's a lot of different sleep techniques or preparation for sleep, shutting down electronic devices, don't surf your phone, don't watch movies, don't whatever. Take some time to really unplug from all the electrical things in the world and let your body naturally kind of go down. And that will help you with a better quality of sleep than not. There's whole studies done on sleep quality and how to attain that. So I highly encourage you to do that as well. Sleep quality also goes into the recovery process. If you work your ass off in the gym and you have 24 hours between muscle groups, maybe even 48 hours between muscle groups, but you have very low quality sleep, your recovery is not going to be at its peak. It's not going to be optimal recovery because your sleep is deficient in some way, shape, or form. So really it gets to the place of, well, is 24 hours recovery better than 48, or is 24 enough and 48 is kind of, too much, or 36? Well, it doesn't really matter, because if you're getting crappy sleep at any recovery time, it's going to have a negative effect on the gains that you're getting. So yeah, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are influencers and personal trainers online. Now, disclaimer: there are very good personal trainers who have science and fact-based evidence that they use and give to people and train them, which is absolutely great. And then you have the other people, the idiots and the con men, that are selling you hype that is not based on scientific studies, that there's no double-blind studies, that there's no supporting evidence or meta-analysis of what they're doing as being superior. And so they resort to all kinds of crazy stuff and attacking the messenger and illogical arguments and so on and so forth. They get real offended and hateful. But you should base your routine and recovery on factual evidence, on facts, not on the hype. So, and as we've shown, there's a lot of different variables that come into play. So you can't just say, well, 24 hours is good, that's the best for everybody, and so let's just make a blanket decision, and that's what it's got to be for everybody. No, it really isn't, because it comes down to the individual response and a lot of other variables. So, for example, you need to have proper nutrition to fuel your workouts but you also need proper nutrition to fuel your recovery, which I would say is even more important. Now, I was a big advocate of intermittent fasting. I would do fasted workouts. So in other words, I would go to bed at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. I wouldn't eat anything. I'd go work out at like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, do an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then I would eat, as part of the process of losing body fat. But I still wanted to experience hypertrophy gains and so on and so forth. But I found I was cutting myself off at the knees because with that, I wasn't fueling my workouts. So those were lacking in energy and intensity, and I was fatiguing more easily. And then for my recovery, my nutrition wasn't as good as it should have been. So again, I'm shortchanging myself when it came to recovery, rebuilding, building new muscle fibers, losing body fat. I kind of did that. But again, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. If we can dial in our nutrition, our exercise, and our recovery, we can get the most optimal results with science-based evidence facts and techniques, and we can lessen the amount of time we spend in the gym, but you still got to spend time in the gym. There's time and energy, but when it gets to the point of where you have these crazy online trainers that are selling the hype and, you only need to work out once a week, or one set per body part, and it's just like the studies show that that's just not true. And when they don't talk about the facts and they don't talk about things like recovery, nutrition, and all these different variables, muscle protein synthesis, and how it comes into play, how multiple sets are better for hypertrophy gains and strength gains, even power gains, versus one set, it just shows you that there's a lot of red flags and a lot of people will sell you hype because they know that's what sells. If you had the choice of putting time and energy and it's this level here, and then somebody comes around here and promises less time and energy and shorter time to get superior results, what are you going to go with? You're always going to go with the hype, but the facts show that you need to put in the hard work. The time and the energy, and you need to pay attention to all these variables. Okay, so we rambled enough on this, and whatever exercise routine that you do, I don't care if it's free weights, resistance training, resistance bands, machines, calisthenics, body weight, kettlebells, steel mace, whatever it is. Carrying sandbags or rucksacks, with 75 pounds, been there, done that. Whatever you end up doing, you need to have enough recovery time, and it needs to be supplemented with good nutrition and obviously great sleep. So again, don't shortchange yourself by overtraining. And a lot of people, even myself at one time, said, well, if I do more, it's better and I'll get more results and I feel good. But really, when it comes down, muscle protein synthesis isn't based on feel good, on feelings. It is a biochemical response of the body, and it's like you can be sore, you can feel the effects of resistance training, but because I feel good doesn't mean that, I must be good to do another workout immediately after this one on the next day with a full body exercise. Because we know that muscle protein synthesis needs time. So when you have somebody that says, no, you don't need time, or I don't need time because I feel good, that feeling is emotional. That feeling is something other. In other words, they're totally disregarding the body and its processes and how it builds and repairs muscles and so on and so forth. So again, there was an old book that said, the heart is deceitfully wicked, who can know it? And out of our heart comes emotions and how we feel. Some feelings are good, some feelings are bad, but generally when it comes to, I feel great, I'm going to do the same body workout every day for 6-7 days a week, you're doing yourself a disservice. So you might feel good, but that's a biochemical response in the brain that has nothing to do with muscle protein synthesis and the time that it needs to recover. Okay. I think we beat that dog to death. So anyway, a lot of stuff comes into play. And the more you get into health and fitness, and the more you actually study the facts, you'll realize there's a lot more variables to, I mean, the rabbit hole goes deep, okay? And there's a lot of things that I used to believe is true, but it was bro science, it was myths, it was things that bodybuilders and athletes said long ago that science has now proved to be false, misleading, misinformation, not true, blatantly false. Kind of like fat spot reduction, the anabolic window, that if you don't eat a half hour after your workout, that, you're going to lose your gains. And science has showed that's not true. The 1 set per body part is more effective for hypertrophy than multiple sets. And it's like the old Mike Metzer thing, which Mike Metzer used massive amounts of steroids. He also used barbiturates as a pre-workout. So, is that really a fair assessment, of doing something that he did? And oh, by the way, Mike Metzer used traditional multi-set training routines, multiple sets, supersets, and so on and so forth, way before he came up with his system. So he had already developed his muscular physique, the majority of it, through traditional push-pull leg and bro splits. But then he got on this 1 set per body part, and really it's not even 1 set per body part if you read his actual, because he does like 1 to 2 warm-up sets, he'll do superset and then do a working set. So really it's, and then tons of time off. It might be great for maintaining a physique, but then again, he was on massive steroids and barbiturates as pre-workout, so how is that for the average person like you and me? Yeah, it's not, and it's never been tested by science, because all the other studies and meta-analysis show that, yeah, it's not true. And if it was true, you would see Olympians in Russia and all these different countries using 1 set per body part to get the strength and hypertrophy gains, which he claims is so superior, but we don't, So yeah, there's a lot of problems. Mike Metzer and Dorian Yates gets up my nose because it's an unfair comparison. It's a lot of hype that was never went through any double-blind studies for some strange reason. Wonder why. And, then the obvious fact that they were fueled by massive steroid abuse and barbiturates. Yeah, you imagine, you could probably get a lot more hypertrophy if you're on speed. I don't know. Maybe there's people out there like you and me who just, crank up and do the speedball and hit the gym and, do some coke and boom, they just rock it, with the intensity. Yeah, that's not a thing for the majority of people, and it's not healthy. So, yeah, there we go. So anyway, I hope you found this video informational. I hope it showed you some things, that there's more out there that meets the eye when it comes to recovery and the different variables involved. And put your opinions and comments, suggestions, tips, whatever it is, put them in the comment section down below. It'd be interesting to read what you've experienced and what you see. And if there's other fact-based information, in other words, if there's published studies or meta-analysis of things that I haven't mentioned that you've seen, I would love to see those things. Definitely post those links, because as I'm retired now, this is kind of the thing I do, is just dive deeper and deeper and deeper into the health and fitness and nutrition studies and what actually works and has been tested. Was there a placebo effect, versus the bro science and the myths that have been prevalent throughout health and fitness. And the hype is just incredible, and it's hype. So anyway, we will see you. So hopefully today is Tuesday here in Korea, because I'm retired in Korea. But I hope that you have a great rest of your week, and Lord willing, we'll see you on the next video. Peace. There it is.